All right, thank you so much. So, hi everyone. I hope you've been having a great time here at the virtual Philly SharePoint Saturday. And today I will be talking about my case study of how I use SharePoint, Power Automate, Power Apps, and Forms to build a speaker database. So before we get started, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, Tri-State Office 365, Soho Dragon, and the Tech Platform for making this happening during such this crazy time that we're all experiencing. It's awesome that we can still have these conferences and get to network and learn all these new things. So thank you so much. And don't forget to do the speaker feedback and the event feedback. It's funny, I actually cover how to use these QR codes in this talk, so this is a little bit of a sneak peek. I just use my phone, use the camera, and turn it on and just hover over it, and it'll pop down at the top. It's super easy to fill out with your smartphone, so please give the feedback. We will all appreciate it. All right, so a little bit about me. I graduated from a program called the Science and Math Academy at Aberdeen High School, which is in Maryland, 2 years ago now, which is crazy to think about. I'm going to be a junior at the University of Maryland College Park, where I am double majoring in information science and operations management and business analytics. Some of the experience I've acquired over the years was being an intern at the Northeastern Maryland Technical Council. Last summer, I was an SharePoint intern for Smithsonian Institution at their Office of the CIO, and currently I am working at Library of Congress as a part of their Junior Fellows program, which I am just finishing up. So actually this Friday, I'll be posting my deliverables of what I've been working on this summer. So if you follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, you will see all that good stuff and everything else that I am up to. I'm pretty active on both of those platforms of posting awesome talks, things I'm doing. So follow me on both of them at Sarah E. Patrick, and I'll probably follow you back because I love networking. One of my most proudest involvements is with an organization called Tech Girls, which is a nonprofit dedicated to sparking that interest in tech in young girls. So there are studies done that middle school age for girls is the crucial time because that's when they will get interested in tech. But then after that age, they'll lose interest in tech. And this is due to not enough mentors and role models for these girls and not enough real life examples. So Tech Girls provides these workshops that are hands-on and tech that really show these real life examples to them. And you can easily teach these girls all these topics. Tech Girls provides the slide deck, the curriculum, everything you need to know. And I've been working with my dad's company, DSA Inc., with holding virtual events more recently. And we just had one yesterday, actually. We used creating a website using WordPress, and the girls absolutely love it. It's so heartwarming, and you just feel so good helping these girls. And we're helping reduce that gender gap that us women struggle in tech, unfortunately. So it's a really great organization. If you're interested in helping, I've added this link, techgirls.org/volunteer, or if you just want to learn more about it, just techgirls.org, or feel free to message me on Twitter or LinkedIn about it. I am super happy to talk about it because I love it so much. And some of the pictures you see here are the one on the top left was our very first event with all those girls who loved it. I was so nervous, but they were just so phenomenal, and they're so smart and so into it. The picture on the bottom left was when I gave a keynote speech about Tech Girls and my experience as a young woman in tech. And then the last photo on the right was when Tech Girls set the world record for the most girls coding at once. I believe we had 342 girls, something like that. And if COVID didn't happen, we were ready to break it, but it's a crazy time. But yeah. Tech Girls, go ahead and message me about it, get involved, because they are really awesome. All right, let's get into the talk about this case study. So 2 summers ago, I did an internship with the Project Management Institute, which is the world's leading not-for-profit professional membership association, all about project management, of course. So the project that I was approached with was that they hold these annual events similar to SharePoint Saturday Philly, and they have a way for speakers to sign up and submit for talks. But it's not like how all these other events had it before when they originally approached me with it. And we'll take a look at this old version. So the main two issues that we had was that speakers had to resubmit their information for every event, every time, and they were not receiving proper updates on these events. So let's take a look at what this original version was. I have it up already. So this was from 2018. So I worked on this after this was already used. And you can see when the calls for speakers was, location, and now this nitty gritty. We asked for their name, email, PMI member ID, all that basic information. And then as a speaker, we want that background information of their speaker bio, their talk information, etc., etc. And then you hit submit and you're good to go. But let's say you want to submit another talk. You have multiple under your belt. You want to have more opportunities to speak at this event. You have to fill out this whole form again and again. And we don't want to have to fill out name, email, all that basic information every time. We already know that. It should already be in the system and known. Additionally, if you want to submit for another event, again, maybe PMI's next year's, that's talk information. If you want to do the same talk, you have to fill all of that out again as well. So they don't really have a stored database, basically, to access this information. The users, the front ends who are interested in speaking, have to fill it out over and over again. And that is not efficient. Speakers don't want to have to do that. They want the information once it's in, it's already good to go. So that was my main approach for this project. So I had a couple main goals. I wanted to create a speaker database that will organize the information efficiently, so being able to access what talks should be done at what times and having all the speakers' information in so it makes sense to us as back-end admins. Allow anyone to anonymously sign up. So this was a huge one because PMI wanted to reach out to new interested speakers, new people that wanted to come to their event and speak possibly for the first time. So having these new speakers sign up anonymously was a big plus. So then once they were accepted, then they were given credentials to get onto the database. Next, we wanted to store the speaker's information and talk details. Like I said, a huge problem was that we had to fill out the information over and over again. So instead of having to do that, we wanted to, after they fill it out once, their information is already stored to access again. And lastly, we wanted them to be able to sign up for multiple events at once. Like I said before, they had to fill it out again and again, and we wanted to avoid that. So first I had to start with some research. I needed to decide if I wanted to buy some platform to have it set up for me or build it myself. So that's when I looked at sessionize.com and how SharePoint Saturday events did theirs for accepting speakers and their talks. And after looking at these, which really helped me get an idea of what I wanted for a speaker database, we were on a budget, preferably free. And I'm not sure if you noticed my theme yet, but Mr. Krabs would not have been happy with me if I spent a lot of money on it. So with that, instead of buying a platform to have it set up for me, that's when I decided to build it myself. So that's when we get into these 4 technologies that I use for my database, which was SharePoint, Power Apps, Power Automate, and Forms. So for the rest of this talk, I'm going to be going over each technology as someone who started as a beginner, had no idea what they were doing, and to help anyone else who might be getting started and show you how I navigated things and problems I ran into and give you a little bit of a pros and cons for each technology. So before we get into that, I want to show you the basic end result that I accomplished over that summer, a very surface level view of how navigating this database worked. So I'm starting as the front end user. I'm the new interested speaker, filling out the sign up to let PMI know that I'm interested at speaking at their event. So we see here, I fill in all of that preliminary information about me and then maybe about my talk later. Do speaker bio. I'm showing here that I don't need to fill out all the fields, just the ones that are indicated by an asterisk to get signed up, because I can add those later in the database. I submit it and I'm good to go. I've let PMI know that I want to speak at their event. Now, as the backend admin, I'm going into SharePoint to look at my PMI speaker database site, going to my site contents to look at the list to see who's interested in speaking at my event. So you can see here I've set up a bunch of lists to organize my information, accomplishing my first goal. So we have chapter sites, locations, sign up, speakers, submissions, and talks, and events. So these are all used for various things to organize that information. So that sign up list is showing the interested speakers. So here is where I've put current PMI speakers information. I've blocked it out for privacy reasons, but that was another big part of my project, getting all everyone's information in already. But I had scrolled down to the bottom and we can see that new interested speaker, which is myself, is already in the SharePoint site. I didn't have to do anything on the back end to worry about that. It's already in SharePoint. Lastly, I'm going to go back to site contents, and let's say I've looked at this new speaker, which is myself, and I want her to speak at PMI. So I'm going to go under speakers list, which are my approved speakers. Sign up was my interested speakers. This one's approved. And instead of having to copy and paste it or do a whole separate filter, I can go under this list, scroll through here, which is all of the interested speakers, and find that new interested speaker that I'm approving and put it in this list so I know which speakers are approved. So that was really great. Instead of having to copy and paste, go back and forth, anything that's inefficient, it's all organized well for me. So now I am an approved speaker for PMI's event. All right, so that's a very basic overview of what I was able to do over the summer. So let's get into our first technology, which is SharePoint. In case you are unfamiliar, it is a browser-based collaboration and document management platform from Microsoft. So I found SharePoint is really great for a company to create their own intranet, to store all their documents in one place so everyone in the company can access it, edit it, things like that. So in this case, I wanted to store all of the speakers' information and know what to do with it and have them soon be able to go into SharePoint and edit their information, add more things, and have it all stored in one place instead of having to enter it again and again from the previous form. So let's take a look of making our first list and the many, many different ways to create a column. So I'm starting in office.com where I see SharePoint, and that's how I get to here. And I'm going to create my new site. When I click that, it's going to give me the option of a team site or a communication site. I found a communication site was really great for creating announcements and sending message to your company. But in this case, I want to be able to have my team members collaborate and edit their information and things like that. So in this case, I'm making a team site instead. So here I can give it the name, description. I'll be adding other members, other owners. This is really great that SharePoint lets you do this up front, but you can edit it later and add more people and things like that. But it's very straightforward of getting it set up in the beginning, which is nice. So my first little issue that I run into is when I want to create my first list under the gear, I'm looking for add a list and I don't see it anywhere. And I was confused by this, and I later found out that list is under add an app because it has both apps and lists. So even though you want to add a list, keep in mind it's also just under add an app. So I go there. I can see all of the templates of apps and lists that SharePoint provides. So this is really great if you know exactly what you want. So we can see here's a contacts list, the calendar, which I used for the final product I had worked on, announcements, has all your columns set up for you. But in this case, since this project was pretty open-ended for me, and I wasn't exactly sure what columns I wanted, I'm creating a custom list at this point so I can add whatever columns I feel are necessary. So now under site contents, I have my first list ready, which is my sign up list, and I'm going to start adding some columns. So the first way I found to add a column was simply right on the screen here, you do add a column, and it gives you a drop down of the different data types that that column can store. This one I'll do a single line of text because I'll be doing first name. But I found this very straightforward and easy. Just like setting up the site, you have the site name, the description, you can change the type in case you click the wrong one, a default value or calculated value if needed, and save it, and then your first column's made. So I'll be showing you if you do that drop down and click more, you have some more options of data types as well as some more advanced settings for your column. So in this case, I see some more options here, which I'll be going over two that I use specifically that helps me with my database organization. This one I'm doing last name. We can see here the requirement for the column. So when you're filling the information of the row, that column has to have information if you put yes for this option. I'm going to go down and hit OK to make sure it saves because I found that SharePoint did not auto-save if there's that OK or apply option. Another way to add a column is to drop down on a current column and add a column there. So I found this was good for if you're in the middle of creating columns and you actually want to rearrange them as you're creating them. So you can see I put this email one in between first and last name. On the flip side, maybe you're creating them and they aren't in the right order, but they're already made. I can drop down on the one you're trying to move and do move left or right. So in this case, I moved email from between first and last name. Makes sense. So those unnecessary columns, I found that when you create a custom list, it comes with this title column as a default. This one I did not find much use for, but there tended to be problems if I deleted it. And so typically I would just hide it to not worry about it. So I click on that column that you don't want, or maybe you don't want it for that view. I'll go over views in a second. I'm going to uncheck it and then apply it so that it won't be seen anymore. Additionally, I can rearrange the columns here by simply doing the up and down arrow. So changing it so that it's first name, last name, then email. Make sure I hit apply. Like I said, make sure you always hit OK or apply if it's there to save it. So now that title column's gone, which is great. Under quick edit, you can add columns here as well, just like we saw before. I found this was helpful if you're already in quick edit. I use quick edit to add all of the PMI current information with just a copy and paste. But other than that, it's the same as creating a column from before. So only if you're already in quick edit is what I found to be the advantage for this. Other than that, it's the same. So quickly, I'm going to show you here that if you click on a different data type, did you see that quick little like blink? I, again, as a beginner, did not know what happened. I was like, oh, did it change anything? Did I lose information? No, it was just refreshing to apply different settings for that specific data type. As you can see here, I'm changing the different lines for editing, and that's because I chose the option for multiple lines of text. That makes sense. So that little weird blink was just it to load the new settings. All right, so I added that. So I'm going to look here at classic SharePoint. So before I was in modern SharePoint, and when they added modern SharePoint, they still wanted to keep the classic version since a lot of people were used to that. And it has some other capabilities that I liked more than modern SharePoint. So as you can see here, I had gone into the list settings, and I can get an overview, like back up a little bit, an overview of all the columns I have created, and also that requirement section. This is really important to me, so I know which columns I needed to have in the database. So in this case, that title column, even though I hit it before, it's still required. That's its default. So I'm going to go in and make sure it's not required to really not have to worry about it anymore and hit OK to save it. So no more of that title column. I can also see here all the different types of each one, which is good to double check, make sure everything's the right data type. I'm changing the first name to be required because that seems important, right? Under here, I can access a lot of other advanced settings, but oh, what a surprise, I can create a column here as well. So similarly to quick edit, this is the same as creating a column in modern SharePoint, but if you're already in classic SharePoint, making other changes, you can do it here as well. So it still does that weird refresh for the other options since I picked multiple lines of text. Make sure I hit OK to add that new column. Next, I'm going to be looking at different views. So I found views helpful for quickly rearranging your columns for a different view for different purposes. So in this case, I'm making an email view, possibly for my email list so that I can properly update my interested speakers. So for this one, I want email to be first instead of first name. And similarly, as we saw in the modern view of SharePoint, I can change it by unclicking it for display and then changing those numbers for the order. SharePoint is also really great that it provides all of these other columns that you can add as options. I personally really like the created column, which tells you the date and time that new row was made. So this was helpful for checking up on speakers of when they had signed up, when they were interested. So I backed up a little bit to show you that in the classic SharePoint, you have a bunch of other advanced options you can change as well to sort, filter, change the style of how it looks, things like that. I hit OK again. And now I have this email view. So I'm going to go back to modern SharePoint and take a look at these different views. So this is the email view with email first. I drop down here to look at my different views. We have all item, which includes all of the columns that you have selected, and then that email view that I just created with email first. So now filling in that database with information. So that's where the front end users come into play with filling in their information. We see here when I hit new and this form showed up on the sign, that title column is still there. And that's because we have to edit it in Power Apps. This is a little teaser for our next demo. But for now, we're going to ignore it and just see how it goes for now of filling in information. Because luckily it's not required. See that little asterisk that I mentioned in the beginning? Shouldn't be a problem. So I fill in the information through this form. You can see that with that data type for multiple lines of text, it opens up this new window. So I can format the text and other options. And then I hit save and it fills in all of my columns nicely. Like I mentioned before, with inputting the pre-existing information that you might have been retrieving from the old spreadsheet or things like that, that's where I use Quick Edit for. I can quickly type in each one here or copy and paste it. So I demoed this error just to show that if you make a field required, it actually checks to make sure that that field is filled in. So that's nice that SharePoint notifies you for that. So now I want to talk about the interaction between columns and lists. So this is what I found especially important in SharePoint for that information organization as a backend admin. So first we'll be looking at the calculated column. So this looks at other columns in that list. So again, we want to reduce the inefficiency of the front end users. So in this case, I'm making a column for full name in case we need that as the back end. And instead of asking the front end user to fill out first name, last name, and then full name as a separate field, we don't want to be redundant and ask for that. We can calculate that ourselves. So in here, I'm creating the formula to append first and last name together. And when I hit OK, that column looks at the other already existing columns. See here, and it already creates that for us. So again, we're trying to make it the best experience for our front end user by already having that set up on the back end. Lastly, when we'll look at now the interaction between lists. So like I said in the very first demo, I have that sign up list for the interested speakers and a separate speakers list for the approved speakers who will actually be speaking at the event. So instead of having them fill out a form twice or having it to transfer over to the different lists ourselves, we are using this lookup data type, which is information already on the site. Back up a little bit so you can see that again. So just like it says, it creates these new settings to pick the list that you want to look up to. So in this case, it's a sign up, and then choose the columns that we want to be in this new list as well from the original list. So I'm using full name, first name, last name, and email for now. When I hit OK, that's already set up. So now, instead of having to go back and forth between lists and figuring out, oh, this one's an approved speaker, I can simply go under the quick edit of my speakers list, drop down, and it looks at all the interested speakers from sign up, and then I choose who is the approved speaker, and then when I hit enter, all their corresponding information fills in instead of me having to do that myself. So thank you, SharePoint, for making that super easy for me. So yeah, that's how I had set up my SharePoint to get all the information properly organized for me. All right, so some pros of SharePoint. It has a rich set of features. As you saw, I had so many different ways of creating a column, adding different features that I wanted for this database. I create my own unique SharePoint intranet. So unlike buying a model from Sessionize or any other platform similar to that, where it has it set up for you, which is nice, but you're a bit restricted that it has to be that format. With SharePoint, and you can create your own, it can be any way that you want it to. It enables cross-department collaboration. So like I said in the beginning, SharePoint's really great for putting documents up in there and having everyone go into that one place to edit it. For us, our interested speakers will all be able to go into one place to see their information and edit it. And lastly, the user decides on the best pricing model, which for me was free. So we always love that. We have a couple of cons. So the first one I have is that the multitude of features can cause a mess. So I said before that it was nice that I had so many different ways to create a column, but as a beginner, that was a bit overwhelming. Usually it's like, oh, you do this one way, then you're good. But there are so many different ways to make a column, which I think SharePoint was trying to do that in case you were in Quick Edit or in Classic SharePoint, but it might be a little bit confusing and overwhelming as a starter. So it might be a lot, might cause a mess. Integration definitely requires extra development effort. Back to the buying versus building a model, I could have bought a platform and it would have been set up for me and I would have been done. But instead I worked on it for a whole summer and that definitely was extra effort to develop it. If you choose to customize some more things, that comes with some costs and investments, which we don't want that, we like free. But if you choose to do that, the final bill can be heavy, and Mr. Krabs doesn't like that. We want it to be free. We want it to be free. We love free. We don't want to have to pay for it. So yeah, just a couple cons, but I did find a lot of advantages of using SharePoint and creating it myself. So now we're going to get into Power Apps. Power Apps is where you can build and share robust apps across your organization and can integrate data from multiple sources, including workflows that automate tasks. So in this case, we'll be focusing on customizing that form, which is what we saw in the last SharePoint demo, that form that popped up on the right side to fill in new information in SharePoint. All right, so we're going to be starting in SharePoint. And it just has a drop down for Power Apps right in SharePoint. Super convenient. It's meant for you to use Power Apps with SharePoint. So I'm doing customized form, which you can create an app from this, but in the case that I was using it, I wanted to create a form. So here I see the data source that's looking at the correct sign up list, which is what I want. I can change the layout to be vertical or horizontal. I choose vertical, and then I can see all those fields to be included or not to be included, just like we saw in SharePoint. So first I want to edit it, delete that pesky title column. So I simply clicked on it and then clicked delete on my keyboard. Or the other way to remove them is to take away the check mark under that fields box. So I'm editing them. And next, I'm demoing a bit of a problem I ran into. So I'm trying to rearrange those small data cards on the list. I'm trying to make email first, but I can't drag and drop them on the white form in the middle. But under the fields, I'm able to drag and drop them there. So I personally found this a little bit confusing. I feel like if you are able to drag and drop them, you should be able to do it in both places, not just one. So consistency, maybe. I found that should be like that, to be a little bit more intuitive. So I found these 3 steps especially important for deploying your Power App to SharePoint. You have to save it, publish it to SharePoint, and then refreshed your SharePoint page. I don't know how many times I missed one of these steps and I thought I broke it or something, but really I just missed one of these steps. So I like to emphasize this: save, publish, and refresh. So I'm going back to my sign up list and I refresh that page. And now when I hit new, my form now looks really nice. Now that's how we want it to look. So I'm back as an approved speaker, going in and creating a new item. So in this next part, I'm demoing another issue. So again, I was very experimental with how I wanted this database to be. So there's a lot of adding columns and deleting them if I thought they weren't necessary. So in this demo, I quickly deleted the one column shortened speaker bio in SharePoint. So when I go and open my form through Power Apps again, that column is still there. And when I try to save it, it won't save. It tells me there's a problem making my changes. I do it one more time just to double check, and it gives me a more absurd error. Like, what does that mean? Regardless, it was not working and I wasn't sure what the problem was. So I click Customize the form again to try to get to the root of the problem. What is going on? So I open up Power Apps again, and we're going to see here that one data card for the shortened speaker bio has a little red X. And it gives me another error that doesn't totally tell me what it means. It says some invalid arguments. I'm not sure what that means. So what I learned from this was that basically when you edit changes in SharePoint, it does not automatically apply over to Power Apps, which makes sense, but I didn't think about it at the time. So in this case, because I deleted a column in SharePoint, I needed to also delete it in Power Apps. It didn't automatically do that for me. So now that I deleted it in Power Apps and I saved, published, and refreshed, back in SharePoint, that data card is gone and there's no more errors. So back to being good to go. Another small, not necessarily a problem, but something I thought was interesting that got me confused again. We saw that data card, not data card, it was the data box and the fields where we're able to find the data sources, and then the fields had the option to exit it. But it seemed pretty important to make sure I was at the right data source and those fields. So I wasn't sure how to get this back since it was automatically on my screen already. So this took me a little bit to figure out. A lot of times I would just go into SharePoint and customize it again, which was not efficient, not intuitive. Don't do that. The way to get them back, so see, it's already automatically on the screen, but if you accidentally or purposely exit out, you want to get it back. For the data sources, you click on the View tab, and then there's data sources. And then to get fields back, you have to click on an existing field and do Edit Field. So I thought this wasn't totally intuitive because they were pretty important to me, and I thought there should be an easier option to get those back up. Lastly, this is actually not a glitch. I thought it was a glitch at the time, but another not so intuitive thing that I found about Power Apps was I wanted to add a button, which was really cool because I couldn't do this in the other platforms I tried. I was adding a button to upload a speaker photo. But as you can see here, as I'm scrolling, that button is just floating as I scroll instead of staying in place like those other boxes with their corresponding label, which didn't make sense to me because the other ones were already staying in place. So why wasn't my button staying in place? So at the time when I recorded this, I thought it was just a problem, but really you have to anchor your button to where you set it, so then it'll scroll along with the other boxes. So anchoring buttons was something I was not aware of because I thought if the other boxes stayed in place, the button should too. But that is not the case apparently. All right, pros and cons of Power Apps. First, you can easily make apps within seconds as a basic workable app. So just like with this form, I was able to drop down, say customize forms, and it was already set up for me. Same thing with the app. You can do drop down, create an app, and it's already set up for you. Sure, you need to make some changes to make it like extra pretty and polished, but it's already made as a basic workable app, which is really nice. Those pages and screens for navigation are easily modified. As you saw, those little check marks made it easy to delete or add more data cards in, and rearranging them was easy as well. And then these apps can easily be shared among your domain or unshared at any time. So sharing it out to your company, but maybe you need to make some major changes, so you can easily unshare it to make those changes again and then share it one more time. Some cons was that these apps are not as fast as you might typically are used to with your smartphone. So I have an Apple, so mine is iOS, but I know some of you probably are out there as Android users. But again, these apps are not typically as fast as we might be used to from our smartphone. You can't publish these apps to any of those app stores because this app is just meant for your company. It greatly depends on internet connection. So again, with it not being as fast as normal, it really relies on good internet. Anchoring buttons, as I explained, I thought it'd be intuitive to already be anchored, but there might be some cases that you don't need them to be anchored. I have not had a purpose for that yet, but I thought that would be intuitive to already have them set in place. And lastly, and most importantly, for my project, Power Apps did not offer anonymous access. So like I said in the beginning, PMI wanted to reach out to any new interested speakers to be able to sign up without needing a login already. So the fact that Power Apps, you needed to be a part of the organization to use it, that was a little bit of a no-no. So Power Apps was still used for our speakers who are already in the database, who are already accepted and now have their credentials to either edit their information, add more talks, add more to whatever information they already had on the site. But we still needed a method to reach out to those new interested speakers without having them sign up already with their credentials. So that's where we introduce Forms. Forms comes in to save the day for that problem. Forms is an online survey creator offered by Office 365, which allows educators to create surveys and quizzes. And then the data can also be exported to Microsoft Excel if you want to. So let's take a look at creating a form and how it helped me for my project. So I'm simply at forms.office.com where I'm creating my new form. So what I personally really love about Forms is that it is so easy to use, super intuitive. It gives me untitled, so I know that that's where I give it a title and I give it a description. It has this button for adding questions, which it only has a few options, but because it's not that many, I'm not overwhelmed with so many different options of these questions. So I'm creating my questions to align with the columns I have made in SharePoint. I can add a subtitle for further description or restriction of what the answer can be, such as being a number. I'm showing you some of the options here. In this case, I don't need to do a number for first name, of course. Then I can make the answer required. So just like in SharePoint, that information has to be filled out. Another point that I really love about Forms is that it's smart. It's trying to predict what other questions I want. So it sees that I already put first name, so it's suggesting last name or middle name, which coincidentally, I do want last name. So that's really great that it provides that. So I'll simply click on it and do add selected, and it's already set up just like my first question. So it already makes it required as well because I made my first name required. To show you the other options it provides, it has a choice question, and you can add as many options as you want. You can even add a other option so that front-end users can fill in their own answer, and you can give the option to allow them to select multiple answers. You can do a rating where you can change the level of the rating and also do a number or a star. You can easily duplicate questions with that little paper icon. This was great. If you have a long question with like similar format, you can simply just duplicate the question there. You can delete questions with that trash can and easily rearrange them with the arrows similar to SharePoint. Super easy to create forms, get some basic feedback. Hopefully you've seen this already with those QR codes from the event feedback and the speaker feedback. So I've quickly gone through these to finish filling out my form. I'm creating it, and I'm previewing it to make sure it looks good. You can see the computer preview as well as the mobile preview, which is important because everyone has a smartphone these days. Going to be filling out those forms on their phone, but maybe on the computer as well. So it's nice that you can preview both options. So now, the moment of truth. Can I have anonymous access to these forms? You can. Under the settings, instead of only people in my organization can respond, I want anyone with the link to respond instead. And we have some other options of the form as well underneath there. Forms has also a bunch of different sharing options. So first we have the option to send and collect responses. So this is the main one you want to use for your front-end users to collect that data. We can do it just by a link, a QR code, so it's nice that it generates that already for us. We can embed it if we're coding something, or do straight through email. Maybe we can use our email list from SharePoint for that. Next, we can share as a template, so maybe your coworker wants to create a form very similar to yours, so you can share it that way. Or share to collaborate, this is for your co-admins, so they can also edit your form. So here I can see who's able to edit it, and you have different links for these different sharing options, which is really great. So here I'm quickly demoing that it's super easy to share to collaborate. So I'm taking this link and I'm going to be sharing it with another member for their edits. And I just want to show you that even though you're giving it to a co-editor, they have the same exact editing capabilities, which is great. So I'm signing in through my school account, go Terps, and I can see here, even though as a co-editor, I have the same exact capabilities, no restrictions, which is awesome. And again, it's just so easy to use. Forms is super easy. Highly recommend using it for those basic forms. So Forms likes to differentiate if the form was shared with you or created by you. So just know that sometimes it's under different tabs, under My Forms versus Shared with Me. So just like sharing it was super easy, you can unshare it by simply doing that trash can button, and that will remove that specific link that you shared out. So it's not like you can never share it again to collaborate with others, it just deactivates that link. So now I'm going back to my other account that I shared it with, and when I refresh my page, that form is gone because I deleted the link. So super, just like with the Power Apps, super easy to share and unshare. All right, so very quickly, now that we're virtual, I'm sure a lot of you have used a QR code already, hopefully to fill out the speaker feedback and the event feedback. But in case you haven't, I'm going to tell you how to do it with a QR code. So open up your phone, just open up camera. You don't need a fancy QR code reader unless maybe I know this works on Apple. Sorry, I don't know Android users. When I've done this talk in person, it seemed to work for everyone. But just for camera, you can hover over this QR code, and then it'll have a drop down that's at the top here. Click on that, and it will go to the form. So I was hoping that you will use this QR code and give me some personal feedback, because I do this every time I do this talk. And in case it doesn't work for you for some reason, I've also provided a link, tinyurl.com/csfeedback20. So hopefully you've gotten that already, because I want to move on to our last technology. So quickly, pros and cons for forms is that it's super easy to use, fast, responsive, and most importantly, we have that anonymous access that we couldn't get with Power Apps. So I'm able to use forms to reach out to my new interested speakers, and then once they get accepted, then we're giving them the credentials to use the SharePoint and Power App. A few cons is that because it only has those few options, we're limited to only questionnaires. There's limited features. So unlike Power Apps, remember I added that button to be able to upload a picture. Forms, at least the free version of Forms, can't do that. So I had to do a link to speaker picture instead. Lastly, editing with autosave. So Forms autosaves, which is nice if you forget to save. However, if you accidentally delete a big section of text, Forms autosaves that. And my dad did that to me once. when I tried to test it with him, he deleted a bunch of my texts, and I said, "What are you doing?" Luckily, I was able to fix it really quickly, but for you, I'm warning you, just everything with autosave, and make sure you're sharing the right link. I meant to send my dad the send response link, but instead I sent him the share to collaborate link, so be careful with that. All right, lastly, we have Power Automate. I have that little cross out because when I started this talk, it was still Flow, but now it's Power Automate, so excuse me if I flip-flop between the two names. Power Automate is a cloud-based software tool that allows users to create and automate workflows across multiple applications and services without the need for developer help. So in this case, I'm going to be looking at getting from Forms to SharePoint because it automates it for me and I don't have to worry about it. So let's take a look at how I handled that. So I am in Power Automate, and we have the two options to create from blank and create from template. So create from blank is, I found helpful for when you know what steps you want to take, or maybe it's a bit more complex of what's usual. But what I really love about Power Automate is that it has so many templates of different flows people have already created. So the one I'm using is Forms to SharePoint. And at the time, it was used 24,000 times. And I recorded this like over a year ago, I think. So when I checked recently, it was more like 300,000 times, I think. Just to show you, it's very popular. And these templates are super helpful because a ton of people have used them already, as we can see. So I just had to simply look up my trigger, which was Forms in this case. And it pops up right there. So highly recommend using these templates. So it has all the steps already set up for me. So I just have to fill in the information so it's looking at the correct list, the correct source of my information. So I'm just retrieving my link very quickly for that SharePoint step, pasting that in, and then because I'm looking at the correct list, it's going to drop down with all the corresponding columns. So then when I click on them, I can see those forms options I created. So that's why I made them the same. I have a reason for this, to have them all put into place. So first name, last name, all that good stuff. I want to make a quick note about the email. So Power Automate tries to help us out by adding a responders email, but because I had set my forms to be anonymous access, it actually doesn't know this information. So I made the mistake of clicking on this, and then in my SharePoint, it said anonymous. So if you set it to anonymous, this forms actually doesn't know, because if it wasn't set to anonymous, the user had to log in with their email, and that's what they're looking at. So I only had this confusion because one of my questions was email. So I just like to discuss the difference between your own email field and the responder's email that Power Automate is looking for. So just be careful with that. So I'm choosing my email instead of responder's email. Going through and clicking the rest of the corresponding information and click save. So we talked about how Forms autosaves. Flow does not autosave. So I'm going through to save that, make sure it's good to go. And I also so I have this one problem that I don't know how to name this flow. So in Forms, it said Untitled, so I knew that's where to name it. But in this case, it was by this arrow here. It didn't clearly say Untitled, so I wasn't sure how to name it. So that is where you name it. So Power Automate, fix that. Not super intuitive. I quickly demo here that it's serious about not doing that autosave. When I go out of it, my name didn't save. Still says record form responses in SharePoint. So I'm going to go back, name it again, and actually click save this time. So let me just emphasize again. Power Automate does not autosave. Forms does, but Power Automate does not. So I save it that time to go back and see that it saves now. Similarly to Forms, we have some different tabs for when you share it or not. So in this case, I'm going to share it with another user. And Power Automate's a little bit more picky. It wants me to share with someone in my organization. So I can't share with my school one in this example. So I share with my dad. Hopefully he doesn't mess up again. So make sure I hit OK. So now he is a co-admin. So those tabs I mentioned before, it was under my flows originally, but now that I have it shared with someone, it's under team flows. So just be careful with that. Power Automate is trying to organize it for you. So let's see all of this in action. I'm pretending to be a couple different interested speakers on the front end, filling out that form. So when I go to my flow, I can see how many times the flow ran and if it succeeded or not. And I can click on each one and see all of that nitty-gritty back-end stuff. So this is helpful for if there was an error to pinpoint where that problem happened. But since it succeeded all the times for me, we see lots of green checks and it all worked out. All right, and now the moment of truth. Did it get to SharePoint? As we can see, 3 new entries of interested speakers already in SharePoint. So thank you, Power Automate, for doing that for me, and I didn't have to think about it. Thank you, automated workflows. All right, our last pros and cons of the day. Power Automate allows cross-site workflows as well as cross-application workflows, which is really nice for automating these tasks without us having to think about it. The reoccurrence is great. Every time someone fills out a form, it happens. It shows up in SharePoint. Don't have to think about reoccurrence, just does it. And then templates, like I said in the beginning, templates were so helpful for me, especially as a beginner. So definitely utilize those. And just a couple cons for this one is I was told that you can start flows, like use the one flow as a trigger, but I was trying to investigate this, not super intuitive. So Power Automate, make this a little bit easier for me, would you? And then those predetermined fields that I mentioned with the email versus responders email. Also, another common issue I ran into was making sure that the data type in SharePoint is correct. So specifically, my problem was that I was trying to do a rating, and I made the rating a number in SharePoint because I thought it's a rating, it's a number. But in Power Automate, it actually didn't show up as a predetermined field, and I found out this was because rating is actually a choice of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and not a number. So just be aware of the different data types that you're creating for in SharePoint so that it'll apply correctly in Power Automate. All right, so again, like I mentioned, I worked on this 2 years ago, so there have been some changes since the foundation I had laid down that this PMI has actually been used in my database, and speakers can actually sign in and see their stored information. And they've also set up automated emails to be sent out to the speakers about the event. So my 2 main problems were solved. I included this because if you had filled out my form, you saw I included a little riddle, so I wanted to tell you the answer. Why can't cats work on the computer? They get too distracted by the mouse. So hopefully you filled out my form so I can see your guesses. So yeah, that is all I have for you. So please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks so much for coming out to my talk, and please make sure you fill out the speaker feedback and the event feedback, and I already showed you how, so you should be doing that. So let me check now if we have some questions. Okay. How to manage security if you want to share the form with external customers. So like I mentioned with those different sharing options, for me, making sure you do the first option, just sending to collect responses, that's the one you want to share, so it's only for the front end users. And if you made the mistake I did of sharing the wrong link, luckily you have that little trash can to quickly remove that link in case you shared the wrong one. Yeah, that's the only question I see for now. So please, I'll be hanging out if you have any other questions, or if you don't want to ask a question here, again, find me at Sarah E. Patrick on Twitter or LinkedIn to ask me some questions there.
Sarah, that was awesome. Thanks very much.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Anytime.